Lindsay Claire here and welcome back to my channel. So for today's video we are doing a speed build here in Windenburg. Now this is on the island and this is going to be a tiny Tudor cottage. So I'm really excited about this build. I haven't built in Windenburg technically since I started my channel. Now there was another build that I was supposed to have, but I ended up losing the footage unfortunately, so I never got to share it with you guys, but that's okay because honestly I think this house turned out a lot better, and it could be because it's about 1/8 of the size of that house because it was like a full-on Windenburg farmhouse, so it was huge. I think it had like 6 bedrooms. It was very similar to my Brindleton farmhouse that I shared about 3 weeks ago. But anyway, going into this house, I was really inspired by the stone wallpapers that we got with Get Together. I don't get to use them that often because the Tudor style isn't really something that I gravitate towards, but when I started building this house here, I was really excited to get to use them. And I go with black and gray just because I chose that one color in the chimney and I didn't like how that color looked with the greenery around. I don't know, it didn't look like a real chimney. It definitely looked like it was, I don't know. I didn't really like how it looked, so I ended up changing it to this gray instead of that greenish gray, and I think it turned out a lot better. And I also gave them this little bit of a porch area here. You can see it. I don't put anything on this porch. That's just because it's so tiny. I didn't think the Sims would be able to walk on it if I ended up putting anything there, but also because I suck at decorating outdoor spaces, and I've been doing them a lot recently, and it's been getting so repetitive that I wanted to try and take a little bit of a break from doing large backyards or large patios where I had to try and fill up the space, just to kind of, I don't know, get something fresh, get something new. So a lot of this is landscaping. Now I do cut a lot of it out just because it makes the video, kind of tedious to watch me place the same plants over and over again. But here I'm starting on the path, so I'm using these garden path stones from the debug menu, and I just place them, I line them up all the way to the front of the lot, and I do end up placing a fence around. We'll get to that later, but it is one of the debug fences, so I had a little bit more of a freedom of placement for it, so I was really happy that I chose to use that instead of one of the ones in the build mode. And I'm going through using these get together windows. Now this is not a get together and base game only build, I will say that. I probably could have made it one very easily, but I wasn't thinking about it at the time. I had already finished the base game plus 1 pack only build for this week. Spoiler alert, it is going to be city living, so it is an apartment, and that'll be up on Friday. But going back into this, I really wanted to try and make this as fun as possible. So the house does end up being functional off the grid, so there is no TV, there is none of that, there's no electronics, so I wanted to give them as many activities, and that's kind of why it ended up not being a base game and get together only, because I do give them some knitting stuff, because I really liked the idea that this was like a craftsman house or an artist house, and this was kind of like their retreat from the world when they needed to just take a break and, you know, do their art and get, you know, some work done. So that was kind of my thinking, which is why I went ahead and did, you know, added some extra activities in there. And this is that debug fence that I was talking about. So as you can see, I'm placing it around, and I do add some broken pieces. I figured maybe, you know, they didn't really fix up this lot a bunch. They kind of just let nature grow around it. You can see I'm placing a lot of natural foliage around, and I figured that they kind of just let, you know, what happened. They took care of like what was right around the house, but everything else they pretty much just left, especially with how beautiful this forest is. I figured that, I mean, unfortunately it's covered in modern mansions, so my story, because I didn't like redo all the other houses, my story kind of doesn't make any sense, but I figured that this island was kind of left mostly untouched by the city people from the mainland, and it was mostly just, you know, small cottages like this for families or for, you know, elderly people or people who just wanted to get away. But most of the plants in this build are going to be debug. That's kind of what kept the cost down. I don't remember this house it's not a starter home, I will say that, but it doesn't cost that much money, and so it should be easily affordable to place in your game. And unfortunately I am building in fall. I haven't done any cheats yet to change my season, and also, I mean, fall's my favorite, but in the game it kind of, when you're doing landscaping like this, it kind of messes with the colors of the plants. So you can kind of see that there's like this haze over all the plants because we are in the fall season, and you can definitely tell in the screenshots that we're in the fall because a lot of the plants are actually dead. But going into the inside, I struggled a little bit with how I was going to floor plan this, which is awful because there is no floor planning for this. It's an open concept living, but I wasn't sure where I wanted to angle like the kitchen, like where I wanted the kitchen to be versus where I wanted the living room to be. Like, you can see me messing around with it for a little bit. I decided to place the stairs first so that way I could get a good idea on where the stairs had to go to fit into the build. And after I placed the stairs, it kind of made a bit more sense because I really didn't want the kitchen to go right next to the stairs, so that is why I decided to place the living room here. And I give them a fireplace just because they have a chimney out on the front, and the chimney was definitely for more aesthetics, just for the look of the outside of the house, but I figured since this was going to be off the grid for heating purposes, they'd probably want a fireplace or something, so that is why I ended up giving them one on the interior. And then I do end up using the get-together couches you see here. Now, I don't use any of the get-together chairs or anything, and I do end up changing the color just because the gray wasn't really working for me. I thought it was too matchy with the stone that we're using. And then over here in the corner, right by the front area here, this is where we end up putting the kitchen. It is a very small kitchen, but it is functional. So I leave one counter completely bare, and I just clutter up the corner counter, and then I also do open shelves for it. So that way it looks like someone lives here, but you can still, use the kitchen and it won't be too awkward. Now, I did use, as I said, this house does function off the grid, so I did use these two pieces. I can't remember if these are base game or vampires. I can never remember that, but it's the wood fire stove and then this really old Victorian looking refrigerator, and then I can't remember if the sink functions off the grid. So I'm pretty sure I checked it. I just looked back at my film and it looks like that I checked, but I can't remember honestly if I did. So before I upload this to the gallery, I will double check and make sure all the appliances are functional off the grid, because as you could see, I did not give them any wind turbines, water collectors, or solar panels, which means all of the objects have to be functional off the grid. You can't fudge it. Like, a lot of the times I have houses that are functional off the grid, but it's because even though the appliances aren't functional off the grid, I put enough wind turbines and stuff in there that it'll end up evening out and your appliances will work. But this time that's not the case, so I'm going to make sure I double check and be sure that all of the appliances are in fact functional off the grid. The two that I'm worried about are the sink right here and then the shower that I end up putting downstairs. Now, I swear that the description says that it's functional off the grid, but I do not remember that shower ever being functional off the grid, so I don't know if it came in an update or if they just changed it or if I was always like that and I'm just crazy. But I will make sure to double check before I put this on the gallery. And then going over here, like I said, I do clutter up this corner counter. I used the book from Vampires and I just shrunk it down and placed it, like merged it into the counter to make it look as though it was a cookbook sitting on the counter. I figured maybe while they were living in this little home, they did a lot of cooking, like home meals. They didn't travel into the city a lot to go into the different restaurants and the cafes. And then over here, I placed this stool from Jungle Adventure, and I do place a whole bunch of candles on it. I place a couple of candles in different areas around the house. I place them here by the art easel, I'll place in a minute, and then I also place them down by the bed. And then I also place a whole bunch of gas lamps. You can see me pulling them out here. I figured maybe the gas lamps were for like at night, or I don't know, maybe they were for like traveling around the house so you could take them from different places. That's why I kind of placed them randomly around. And then the candles were there for like some extra lights, and then also to highlight areas where the Sims spent the most of their time. That's kind of what I was thinking. But I was also when I placed them here next to the easel, I was really excited. I almost wanted to play for a little bit and take a picture, because I could just picture like at night your sim painting and the candles. Now that the candles like decrease in size and like they drip wax, I could just picture like how picture-esque it was going to be, having your sim painting with like the glow of the candles next to them with like all the wax melting onto the paper. I don't know, I was really excited about that, so I still might end up going in and taking a picture of that. But like I said, I do clutter this up with a whole bunch of indoor activities just because there wasn't a whole lot of space for outdoor activities and there is no TV or any electronics. So I gave them the easel, I give them this guitar, and then I also give them some knitting stuff just because A, I'm still obsessed with nifty knitting, and B, I think the knitting skill is really cool. And it's also quite an easy way to make money. Like, I have someone who's been doing some knitting and they're making like $100 per item. And if you sell like a whole bunch of items a day, then it could give you up to like $1,000 a day. So it's a really easy way to make money. And I figured that since this was a craftsman's sim, they would definitely be using Plopsy quite a bit. But going downstairs, this is where I place the bathroom and the bedroom. So you saw I closed off this area right here. Now there isn't anything behind that wall. It's kind of like a faux wall. I just did it to make the room look more cohesive, because the downstairs there would have been this like really awkward hallway that led to absolutely nothing. Now if you do end up wanting to expand this house, like if you wanted to be a family house, you could definitely delete that wall and have that be like a hallway into like the kids' bedroom or something. But I decided to close it off just because there was no purpose for it being there. And then this is the shower I was talking about that I could not remember if it was functional off the grid or not. I swear when I looked at it, it said that it was, but I never remembered it ever being like that before. But I placed a couple of different clutter items in this bathroom. I don't fill it up too much just because the stone walls were a little overbearing, and I thought if I put too much decorations on them, it would just look too, just a little too crowded. And then going down into the bedroom, it is an open bedroom, it is not closed off. Obviously, if you were going to have a family living here, you'd probably want to add another bedroom over here, or at least an extra wall just to close off this bedroom. But I placed 2 bedside tables, and I'm using this bed from Cats and Dogs. It's one of the normal looking swatches though. Most of the swatches are like old knitted patterns, and I almost contemplated doing the knitting patterns because I do give them nifty knitting stuff, but I decided just to go with the plain one because it matched with the rest of the house just a little bit better. And then I placed a couple of decorations on the walls. And I also give them a pegboard. I figured maybe they kept all of their artist supplies down here. That way, all their artist stuff wasn't sitting upstairs in their living room in case they did end up having some guests over, or if this did end up housing more than one sim, because there is a double bed here, so you could easily fit 2 sims in here, one who's a painter, one who's a knitter. But besides that, that is it for this build, so I hope you all enjoyed this one. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you all next time. Bye!